Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the MSP Initiative, MSP Talk. We are on
Did we
July
freeze there?
18th. So, we're right in the thick of summertime here in North America and Europe for that matter, except for our friends down in, Australia, New Zealand, and that part of the world's wintertime. Yeah, they got the reverse, just like how the toilet spins, right? A couple of housekeeping items that we get done in the beginning of these calls, and then we get into the good stuff. So let's just get right into that right now. Here we go. MSPinitiative.com. This is what we do here at this organization. So you'll see this session and every other session we've ever done is here under the sessions tab in podcast and video format. So feel free to check this right after this and go backwards in time, and you'll see all of our sessions that go back till 2020. We have an event coming up in Denver, second week of Denver on the 14th and 15th called MSP Community Minds. We're bringing in experts from around the industry and MSPs themselves to do both panels and workshops with this event. It's completely a knowledge learning event, no death by PowerPoint. So we definitely would love for you to join us. It's absolutely free to register. So all you got to do is get to Denver, and the rest will be unraveled for you. So definitely take a look at that. This is what we did when we parked our bus and went into more of a formal, let's pay it back to the community type event. Then we have the remainder of our MSP community block parties. We had several in the beginning of the year in Europe, and now we're coming back to the US side. The last 3 of the year are in Florida. So we cover Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and Orlando. Surprise. Like every other MSP event is in Florida anyway. So the first one is the MSP Community Boat Party. This is being done in Fort Lauderdale, right out across from the Diplomat Beach Resort. We're working in conjunction with our friends from Taylor Business Group and the Big Conference. So if you're in Florida or just want to come in and do a community boat party down the Intercoastal in Fort Lauderdale, feel free to join us and register. If you're headed to the Taylor Business Group Big Conference, this will be part of the agenda of that event as well. So if you haven't heard of either, go ahead and check it out. We really love this thing. And then, of course, we have DattoCon Miami. We did DattoCon Dublin in Europe. This is its sister event in Miami. So if you're headed there, we'll be doing a party, and it'll be on the agenda for that conference as well. And then lastly is the MSP Community Block Party in Orlando. If you missed last year, we did we actually brought on the All-American Rejects as to do a special party for the IT community. My menu is a little tough to deal with, but it's in there. If you go to past party, you'll see it under 22 MSP Community Block Party. Check it out. We're going to bring in another band in this year. We're about to announce it. We're super excited about it. That is the big one to wrap up the year. We have some MSP community offers. So these are companies from around the industry giving you some hookups. So check it out. And lastly, our industry calendar. And this is just our homework for the year. We'll start working into 2024 as well. But effectively, if you're just curious what's happening in the industry, here it is. And if you think something's missing, just go ahead and submit the event, and we will add it there for everyone to see. And that is our housekeeping. So thank you for just bearing with me while we kind of wrap that all together. Now we bring in our guest speaker for this session, Frank from IGI Labs. Frank is actually out and about in Portland, he said. So he's gonna be joining us live. There he is. How you doing today,
There you
Frank?
go. Hey, great, George. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I just ran into you in Dallas when it was like 110 degrees, it felt like.
Yeah, thankfully we got out of there in time, huh?
Man, Texas is a great place, but during the summertime, man, 100% humidity and 100 degrees, that definitely,
Yeah, they were all trying to all the locals were trying to tell me, oh, this isn't very humid. I was like, okay.
And then they're like, oh, well, you should just come to Phoenix where it's like 110 degrees but no humidity. I'm like, there was a time when my shoes melted in Phoenix.
Yeah, that can happen.
So I don't forget that, because it's not often that happens. But it happens.
Well, we'll be in. I assume you're going. Well, ChannelCon's in a couple of weeks, so we'll be there in Vegas in toasty warm there too.
100%. Yeah, it's going to be definitely toasty. I won't be in Vegas myself. My team will be there. I'll be there the week after in Denver. So if you want to join us there, let me know. But Denver's hopefully not too toasty this time of year.
Yeah, no, not bad.
100.
Not
So,
bad.
Frank,
Yes,
for
sir.
people who don't, you've been on before, but for people who, aren't aware of you, I always like to start with, hey, let's learn a little bit about the person. And then like, we can go into like what you guys do at your company and how that
Okay.
applies to like, the larger
Sure.
picture. So all
Yeah.
you, friend, go for it.
Yeah. So, been a long time vendor side of business. So I'll admit haven't been an MSP, haven't been a reseller partner, but I've spent time at Apple, at many years at Intel, did an early retirement from Intel, worked consulting. I've worked at Cinex for a couple of years way back when, about 15 years ago. So kind of had the distribution partnership world, and working now for IGI Cyber Labs, the maker of Nodeware, which is a vulnerability tool. And I guess my career success, my passion, interest has been around building partnerships and alliances, and sort of the 1+1 = 3 kind of, effort. If whether you call it build a community, right? It's the pieces working together and sort of figuring out how they work together, what's the value of them working together, taking egos aside, and position A, we're the best and we're the only ones, and blah blah blah. It's like, you know what, nobody's that good. Nobody's that special. We all need each other. And really kind of driving that as my mantra, if you will, in terms of what I like to do and what I like putting together.
Totally awesome. Yeah. And the channel is a diverse sandbox.
Yeah,
From a lot of people from different angles. I love how some people come from, kind of more your path, right? Big box corporate, like, the names that everybody recognizes. Other people come from, the trench, I like to call it, right? And work the other
yeah,
way.
yep,
But
yep.
we all converge somewhere, some way. Um,
Well, like you said, at these shows, right? You see the range of vendors, you see the range of people, and so, oh, didn't you used to be there? Yeah, but now I'm here. I mean, the movement is so dynamic. There's always some key learnings and some additional piece you learn that you put together, and again, you just kind of keep adding to your brain resume, if you will, your brain knowledge. And I think everybody's got a piece of value to contribute, and just where you put it together is kind of up to you. And but there's always value in what you learn, and what going to these shows. I love just half the time, I see a lot of vendors that will just go to their booth to set up, and then they're separate. I like going into the keynotes, and some of the breakouts, and learning what people are saying, and hearing what direction, maybe be honest, it might be BS, but at least you're hearing what they're saying and how they're positioning it, so you can understand when somebody says, oh, we love this, but you got to have a point counterpoint, and you can't do that by sitting in a room or sitting away from where it's all happening.
no, 100%. Talk to us a little bit about what I know it's maybe a confusing name, right? There's IGI Labs, and then there's like, I guess, the brand underneath of it. Maybe you can like make it a little
Yeah.
streamlined for us.
Yeah. So quick history, the overall company, Infinite Group Inc., or IGI, has been around over 30 years, doing various things. And the last 15, 20 has been focused on cybersecurity services, and out of like pen tests and virtual CISO and incident response kinds of things. Out of that came Nodeware, which is the product. It's a SaaS cloud platform where we do continuous, normal business hours vulnerability scanning and assessments. And so IGI Cyber Labs is the company that produces Nodeware today. So you'll see the branding as Nodeware built by IGI Cyber Labs. And just, George, you there? Just made to make sure we're connected.
Yep, I got you, my
Oh,
friend.
okay,
All
perfect.
good.
Okay,
Sorry
sorry.
about that.
No. I was having connection issues before. I wanted to make sure we were good. So Nodeware is the product. It's a MSP focused product, channel only. We sell to MSPs of various sizes, and they use it to do continuous scanning, right? So there's it's an increasing issue or increasing need for whether it's cyber insurance, or it's compliance, or it's audits, or just good cyber hygiene, right? I mean, it's a key element kind of been, if there's been kind of three key elements that have been called out, and I kind of consider vulnerability management the fourth, but you've got MFA, you've got security awareness training, and you've got sort of EDR, any kind of DR kind of response. And those three, maybe add a firewall, is kind of the have been the critical elements. But the thing that we really promote and drive and enable with Nodeware is a proactive approach to cyber, right? So what we provide is a tool. It's a sensor-based or agents, kind of a combination, where you can identify and sort of fingerprint, and you can then scan every IP address on the network, on a company's network, whether it's on-prem or off. And so with that, right, an MSP and their techs are able to go in, proactively look for, the latest CVE that was just announced a couple of days ago, or one that was maybe announced a couple of years ago. We can look at every system. We can look at with authenticated and credentialed scans. We look deep into the system and can look for, word patch that's missing, or a KB file on a server. But those are the elements that the bad guys, right, are looking for. And so if you're not looking for them proactively, you might get hit before you know it, or before you're able to fix it. So we kind of really focus on a proactive approach. We provide, it's a easy setup on the front end, right? Sort of the whole deployment can be 20 minutes. You can be up and collecting data at your customer, to remediation recipes. So once you find a CVE or a vulnerability, that's great. But now you need to know how to fix it, right? The MSP needs to quickly, know where to go, right? And normally they have to go and research it and Google, CVE 2022-1065, right? And figure out what to do. Well, within our tool, we're actually able to get that specific remediation recipe in the tool. So the MSP doesn't have to, spend that extra time looking for how to fix it. So that's kind of our value add. Our distinction is the continuous elements, the proactive nature, the reporting for when you do need to do compliance and audits. We have those available, and you can produce them at any time.
Wow. So this is kind of a larger topic, right? Because if you talk to anyone that has, I don't know if it's the level of a CISO, but anyone with a more security focused background, they'll tell you that vulnerability management should just be part of the equation, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like I would say most MSPs probably don't have that in their back end tool set regularly.
Correct.
Like they do patching, there's security products, right? There's things like that. And like whenever somebody flags them on a bigger issue, obviously the industry is pretty squawky and they realize they got to go do a 0-day something or other. Right. But generally speaking, like we hear words like pen testing, and I guess vulnerability management falls in that category to some degree. And it's really, you hear about this being done point in time, right? Like, hey, we do this once a year, or we do this once, every 6 months.
Yeah.
And I was going to say my last one, there's some questions that always come up on the affordability for the non-corporate, big company to be able to do stuff like that. Like most SMBs wouldn't do a pen test, for example, unless they're required to.
The question really is kind of a bit of a definitional requirement, right? There's three.
Let's see if Frank's signal catches up with us. Frank, you with us, buddy?
Yeah.
All right.
Can you hear me okay?
Rewind about 15 seconds. There's three things.
So there's sort of there's kind of vulnerability assessment. Yeah, there's three things. There's vulnerability assessment, right, which is the one-time point in time scan, right? So at least it's a vulnerability lookup. It's sort of report a single time and point in time, and that's been kind of the norm for a lot of MSPs and their customers, right? That's kind of been the, I need the checklist, right? I'm applying for, I'm got to do my compliance report. I need the check item. There's vulnerability management, which is more the continuous scanning, right? It's not just doing the once a deal. It's being continuously looking, being proactive, right? But it's from an internal standpoint, right? You're looking internal, and it's ongoing, and it should be a daily occurrence. Pen test is a third level, which is really kind of the external trying to break in, right? It's the white hat hackers right? Testing in, finding the vulnerabilities, finding breakpoints, and reporting on those, and then providing that data to an IT shop or the MSP. That's really kind of a third-party check, right? The vulnerability assessment and the management, the MSP could and should do every day, but the pen test is really kind of an external third-party requirement, or at least it should be, right? The companies need, the fox can't be watching the hen house, and so that's really the distinction.
Okay, so really, like what your company does is more of the automated, reoccurring kind of, hey, let's tell you what you have versus what we know. And the pen
Right.
test, which do you do that, or is that's not something you do?
There's a part of the IGI, the services side of our business, right? There's the IGI Cyber Labs and there's IGI Cyber Services. The
Okay.
services does the penetration test. So if an MSP is needing that third party test, then they can contact me and we can set you up with that. And we have those available through distribution, or we can work with you directly if needed.
So basically, that's something that has to really get scoped out, right? Where a
It,
human
it
being
does,
can
yeah.
try and actually see
It's
if they can break it.
yeah. Well, it has to be scoped out both for the scope of the project, right? Because whether it's 5 externals and or 10 or 20 or more, or if it's just sort of how big and how often it needs to be done. So it's kind of it's definitely a back and forth, kind of sounds bad, but it's a discussion between us, you, and the end user, on what's needed, and what reporting they need and all that. So we customize the pen test reports quite a bit.
Got it. So like, there's almost like, I would assume that you could use some of the data that's in the vulnerability system as part of the work that's done on the pen test if you go down that road.
It could be, absolutely. Well, it kind of both goes both ways, right? The pen test is going to tell you what the really critical things are that need to get fixed, right? Because we could get into there, or the pen tester can. So but again, that's kind of the one time, you wouldn't do a pen test every month, right? You would do it maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months, kind of just depending on budget and need. But the vulnerability assessments and management is the ongoing piece. So they support each other, right? Because if you're doing good proactive vulnerability management, the pen test is going to come out shining, right? Because they might still find a way in, but it's going to be reduced, right? It's kind of reducing the risk of the good guys getting in and really reducing the risk of the bad guys. When you can be that proactive, when you can be doing it on a continuous basis, and then when you have to do the pen test, it's going to be not as ugly and scary coming out. I mean, some of these pen tests comes out with big, long, deep reports that are all the findings and the suggested steps and remediations. But if you can reduce that on the front end via vulnerability management, then you're kind of ahead of the game.
No, 100%. So obviously, and we've talked about this forever, right? That like the MSP doesn't have enough in-house resources most of the time to actually function from all avenues, right? They got to use outside parties to help offset what they're not good at or what they don't have
Absolutely.
resources for. So like, what
Right.
happens when they fire up your system, they scan in a customer's environment, whether it be cloud environment or prem-based, whatever, and then your system comes back to them with, hey, you got a problem. Now what? Now what do they do once you've like basically flagged them and said, we've stumbled upon something you need to know about?
Yeah, so typically our tool today basically will identify that vulnerability, right? And if it's a critical vulnerability, we'll include, we'll send out alerts and let them know. But we provide the remediation steps. So they would still need their other tools like RMM tool or SIM tool to go and deploy the patch, or to remove a file that shouldn't be on, et cetera. That's what we can really find, including a word application that is got something missing, right? So we're not just looking at the core OS, but we're looking at other apps and other programs on those systems, for what could be done. So again, it's the work still needs to be done. We're not, we help you identify it, we help you reduce the time to get the work done. Right? You're not having to go research, how do I fix this one? Well, it's right here. We tell you. we're looking at some different ways, and we have different integrations with partners, like working on things like with Highwire and Televi and Augment and others that are providing different elements of reporting or tools that our data can go into, so that it can reduce the panes of glass that that an MSP has to look at. Right, our data can go into them, and then when they need to go deep in our platform, they still obviously have the access. But there's again, I feel for the MSP often when you go to these shows and you see 40 vendors in a hall, and everybody's got 98% of them have something either directly or indirectly with cyber, and like it's overwhelming. I get it. And we're trying to, at least on our part, we're trying to keep it simple, that there are some absolute basics you have to do. I mean, obviously, clearly MFA, firewall, some EDR stuff. The security awareness training is is the next sort of really important thing. Whether your end user is getting it directly or through you, that's it's a good opportunity. And then we think vulnerability is the next sort of fourth leg of the stool, right? You gotta have it to be in good standing or in good sitting, if you will.
What happens if the how to fix this problem, response that you guys send back is too complicated, or they don't understand what to do about it? Where do they go?
That's a good question. They can go, I mean, they can come to us on the services side. We have some resources that can help them, get things fixed. The tool, Nodeware itself won't provide that level of guidance. They ultimately they're going to have to go outside. It could be, like TD Synex, for example, has got, ServiceSolve that can, help resolve some issues. One of our distributors, Rain Networks, does some value add support. But it's, you probably have a better resource list of sort of experts that people can go to than I do. Maybe you provide that, but I think, ultimately, again, kind of back to the beginning, right? No MSP is an island, right? You got to be connected. You got to have the peer groups. Probably is one of the bigger opportunities. Just kind of came to me, right? You got Reddit, you got the various peer groups.
So would you say that the type of work, like maybe an MSP is like, hey, I don't understand what's going on, I'm just going to reformat this particular system or redeploy it, right? Kind of start from fresh, or but if it gets past a certain point, would this be the work like a true SOC type company would be doing in order to remediate?
I think so. I mean, that's kind of where it may be going, whether it's a SOC or I mean, I'm trying to think. There are a couple companies I've thought of that are doing, just that. So Accenture kind of is the ultimate, right? I'm just thinking at an enterprise level. But there's got to be some channel ready companies like that, that can do it. And again, part of the IGI services side could support some of that. So it's worth a conversation. I think they just, when they get to that point, it's ask me, I can help, or ask your distributor, ask your peer groups. If I think I don't know how many, you probably know this better, how many peer groups typically does an MSP belong to? It's probably more than one, but
I would say many aren't involved in any, but there is definitely value for peer groups, because you can leverage
absolutely
the other people in your group if you don't have the resources on staff, right? And usually as a group, somebody has the answer in your, kind of 10 company group, more, somewhere around there.
Absolutely.
Or they're at least pointing in the right place. And let me guess, and I think we touched on this on a call long ago, or a podcast long ago. This type of functionality you would usually find kind of as part of other platforms, and you've kind of now are offering it outside of those solutions so that it's more consumable to, like the MSP small business type, approach. Yes.
Well, sort of. I think a lot where we overlap with some tools that have been out there for a while is the asset or the IP address identification, right? There's network management tools like Avik and Enable and some others, right, that are doing the network management. They're moving things around, they're showing where they're connected. Where I'm actually kind of surprised in the couple of years I've been working with Nodeware, is where the vulnerability is always been kind of an isolated product. From enterprise level, you got Qualys and Tenable, right? In the channel products, you got Bullscan, Rapid Fire Tools, you've got Connect Secure that have that are in this space, but we're all I say they're all still independent products that nobody's really integrated well, that I've seen anyway, a true vulnerability into a bigger stack, at least a continuous vulnerability. So, the ConnectWise has a little bit of vulnerability, but they're kind of limited on their product. But any of the other products need to add vulnerability management, and that's what I'm working a lot on, is integrations and alliance partnerships with, our data can be sent up via API, any level of the data, or one piece of it or all of it. So we're working with folks to be able to take our data and put it into their platform, mixed it
Yeah,
in, because they don't have it.
fair. I almost feel like, all right, take the enterprise guys away, right? Tenable and some of these other kind of big name companies. I
Right.
almost feel like this is a missing part of like the RMM, like that's already like
Absolutely.
scanning the network, and you're like,
Yeah.
why? Surprised they don't have an avenue for this. So like here it is, right?
Yeah. No, because it's a different type of program, right? It's having to manage the massive databases, right, of known vulnerabilities, right? It's having, the agent or the sensor that can go out and identify the assets, sort of do a scan on it for looking for certain types of things that match up against that database. So, the RMMs are able to, once we find the remediation, right, they're the tool that an MSP should be using to fix it. But
Yeah.
they haven't really made that internal to connection. Maybe it's on the roadmap, but it's not an easy thing to do, to just add vulnerability, homegrown, right? I
No,
mean,
fair.
if they want to come and integrate my product, great, let's do it.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a good route.
Yeah.
When you said about all these databases, like what are we talking about here? Like I don't go and look for known
No,
exploit databases. Like that's not
no,
in the
but
regular routine.
there is a national CVE database, a national vulnerability database. So Microsoft, Cisco, Ubuntu, whoever, right? When they discover a CVE or a known vulnerability, it's sent to these guys. They assign. You've heard of a CVE number, right? The common vulnerability and well, I can't remember what the E stands
Exploit
for.
maybe.
Exploit, yeah. The common vulnerability and exploits. When that gets published, then that gets put into this database for people like us to be able to draw against. And that's where, if you wanted to go to the database on your own, you could go in and look for CVE number, again, 2023-1065, and find out about it. Or you could go to NIST and sort of look at on their data website. So it's the data is there, but again, it's cumbersome, right? It's a lot of stuff there. You don't want to have to go through all of that. And that's where we really shine in being able to identify a CVE and give you the recipe for how to fix it. So you don't have to go searching for a half an hour to find how to fix something.
No, 100%. Let me ask you this. I mean, how does this play when it comes to like cyber insurance renewals? Do you have people like stapling to the questionnaire, hey, by the way, you didn't ask about this, but we actually do this, 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 and this as part of our program?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we just announced a partnership last week, for example, with DataStream Insurance, and we're working with a couple others in similar space. That the insurance companies, right? They somewhat negatively from my friends, but they don't want to pay out, right? They're trying to avoid paying out, right? And whether that's helping you reduce the risk to start with, or finding things that, yeah, you said you were doing MFA, right? MFA is a requirement, right? It's easy to say, yeah, check that box, but increasingly so, that I think the carriers and the underwriters and the claimants, right? They're going to say, okay, show me that you did MFA for every single device on June 22nd. right? You know, it's a validation. It's not just to say that you've done it, but more increasingly that you are doing it continuously, right? And the same is extending on to vulnerability management, where they may have required a year ago until they started losing their shirts that, hey, did you do have you done a vulnerability assessment? Yeah, check box, right? Move on. But now they're actually starting to require vulnerability management. And that's like what the FTC safeguards is kind of a similar game, where the requirement is not just that you've done it before, but that you're doing it continuously. You're doing it all the time. So that's, from like our reporting and our, audit support and the compliance support is, if you're not doing it, you're going to be asked to one way or the other. So, as an MSP, if you're not doing vulnerability management, proactive management today, you better look into it quickly, because it's either going to come down as a government regulation, it's going to come down as an insurance regulation. It's kind of sort of almost there, right? I mean, if you're not doing the four legs of that pillar, you're not going to get insurance either to start with, or you're not going to get it renewed until you can prove that you're doing those things.
Wow. Okay. That's good. Like, so we're a little bit still ahead of it, which is good.
Still barely ahead of it, but but it's coming fast. I mean, MSPs I talked to, they're, oh, you know what, I've been thinking about vulnerability for a year or two, but now I need it. Tell me more. Well, how does this work? How do you price? How do you, how do I work with my other tools that I have? So the questions are coming much more intelligently, let's say, and timely.
Would you like, so um, for people that are engaged with some sort of SOC provider, would this be something you would still recommend to be working in tandem with whatever agent they're using, or is there an overlap?
There might be a little bit of overlap, but most of the stocks aren't doing anywhere near continue. I mean, they're doing scoping for things that might happen. It's kind of like looking at a SIM tool, right? The SIM and a EDR tool are, yeah, something's happened, let's go fix it.
Mhm.
Right. And the SOC in a certain ways is doing the same kind of thing. They're being a little bit more proactive with some tools, but I think, from what I understand from the SOC services that I've seen, and they're enabled to be more proactive, and the data that we provide could easily be provided to the SOC. And we have an integration with SOC Soder, as an example, MSP friendly SOC, that, right, they're using our tool to deploy out in addition. So our data is going into their system, and they're able to support it and fix things down the line as they find them.
Got it. Does this tie in? I assume you have integrations to all the MSP tools, right? I guess the idea is that it would come into their system like an RMM would be, and create tickets and add notes and like track things that way, right?
Yeah, we're a little bit in development with that. So we're one of the ConnectWise Pitch IT finalists this year, and as part of that, we're doing our integration. So we'll have that done in a few months from there. But in the meantime, we do 3 alerts on new asset found, or a new critical vulnerability found, or if a sensor goes offline, we can send alerts that can go via email or Slack channel into your PSA receiving ticket or ticketing system. So that's kind of our basic level. We do have a full set of APIs. So if you got any API capabilities, whether you just want data, you just want reports, whatever, out of our system, you can pull that via API keys, and very straightforward if you know API language. If you don't, then we can help you do some of that integration. But so we're in process. We're still improving that level of automatic deployment of data.
That's cool. Well, let's get into like the part that everybody always asks you, right? Like the service, right? There's a minimum? Is there an agreement? How many endpoints, or is it by endpoint? Like,
yeah. So we actually make it as easy as possible, or we think it's easy as possible for the MSP. So we have our traditional subscription model, which is a 1-year subscription for a minimum of 50 assets. So it's a block of 50, and those can be shared across the customer. So it's not a huge burden. And that, subscription can be paid up front for a year, and that would be $330 from distribution, or from us directly, if you want to pay for that upfront. So it's about $6 an asset per year, or per month, in that math. You can do a subscription, an annual subscription, and just pay it monthly. So again, the same 50 block. Or we've added this spring a consumption model. So if you don't want any contract, you want to just go month to month, just pay, we at the end of the month, we track how many you used and we bill you based on that. And again, that's via distribution or direct. So no contract, 1 month it might be 30, and the next month is 300. You do it. And if you want to convert to save some money over time, and the customer set, you got the contract from the customer, let's do a subscription and save some money and be locked in for the year.
So what would you like, what's best practice from your perspective in terms of endpoints to track? Am I tracking every laptop, desktop, or am I tracking servers? Am I tracking, what am I tracking?
You can, it's every IP address. So we can track all the way to the edge cameras, to the VoIP phones, to the printers, et cetera, right? So we also enable the untracking, if you will, right? We can say a specific device we don't want to scan that, or a specific range of IP addresses we want to turn off from scanning. So that capacity is there. But you really want to be looking at everything. I mean, all these different devices, whether it's a Roomba in the home office, right, to the Nest cameras, to a very sophisticated server, all those devices are attack surfaces or potential attack surfaces. So if you're doing other protections on some of them, then you can turn off the nodeware for that address. But realistically, again, you got to be covering everything. Everything everywhere. It's part of your, you got an employee that's got a notebook that never is in the office, right? Put an agent on that device. Whenever they're connected to the internet, they're connecting to us, and we can continue scanning them on a daily basis.
And let's use that example for a second. In remote employee working from home, are you tracking vulnerabilities just at the operating system level, or what about the actual software installed on the machine as well?
The software installed as well. So we're tracking everything. We don't track like, for example, Word documents, right, or Word programs. We can track those. But we're also checking the OS on an ongoing basis. So it's what's on the system when it's in the credentialed scan, like agent-based. It's a fully authenticated credentialed scan, so we can look pretty deep and cross within that. And then again, we're matching what we find against the database to say, hey, we found these 3 things that should be on the system that aren't, and vice versa. We can find some, because this file isn't on here, it's creating this vulnerability that is known to the hackers, and you better patch it, right, or fix it.
Okay, I mean, listen, I love the answer, because let's face it, there's a lot of software out there. Some stuff you just like, I love the guys who are like, oh, I just downloaded the free network scan tool just because I need to find something, and then it's still installed. Like that happens all the time, and then they don't even remember, right? And then all of a sudden, like, there's a problem because that's a bad package somewhere, right? So
well, we've seen the tool. It's now owned by Avid, but SaaSleo, right? SaaSleo is doing SaaS monitoring, sort of like we're doing the hardware monitoring. They do the SaaS application. So again, Joe Blow, employee, decides to load his own version of Dropbox or his own version of whatever, right? Pick a SaaS program, which is risky, right? Because now you're, again, exposure into that app has access to other data, or simply it might be, or they might already have a site license for it, an enterprise license, and the guy's paying $20 a month for it on his expense report versus $10 he could be paying through enterprise. So there's different ways to look at SaaS applications and the risks that they provide as well. I don't know that area as well, but that team and I, we've presented on webinars together about sort of the hardware, software, continuous monitoring standpoint, because, again, you see it every day, right? The bad guys are getting better at being bad.
What about, all right, let's go back to that home employee scenario again. Let's say they're on that Dell or HP, whatever it is, Lenovo, and let's say the firmware on their computer's behind, or the BIOS version, right? Is it going to track that too?
Yeah, we can. With some of that we don't have access to, just even because just what the limitations that the provider puts on it or the manufacturer. But in general cases, yeah, we can track all of that.
Yeah, because like, hey, sometimes if there's a problem, unless there's a problem, sometimes you don't go and update those things, right? Like it's
Right,
like
right. Right,
we'll,
and
we'll deal with
that's
that when
where
we get
again,
there.
that's where our the proactive nature of the vulnerability management is critical, because things just come up, right? You don't know, or again, somebody installs something which deactivates something else, right? The DLL gets turned off, or whatever it might be. There's all kinds of things that happen between scans if you're doing a monthly or quarterly, right? So you got
100%.
to keep up on this. And again, I found I was data point a year ago. So when a Cisco announces a vulnerability, or anybody, right, the hackers are on tune trying to get at that immediately, right? They know who's got Cisco equipment. They know who's got this particular switch, and if they do this. And so if you hear of a big vulnerability, that's great. You're going to get it on the news, and some of these are going to come out and be public, but 99% of them you're never going to know about, because they don't hit everybody. They don't affect everybody. But
That's
when they
kind of
affect
scary that the
you,
bad guys are up to date as hopefully you are
oh,
too, but it's like a race.
oh yeah, it is. That's a great way to think about it, right? It's a race to who can exploit or patch first, right?
Yeah.
And they know what's out there, right? The bad guys are attacking every surface possible, and if you're not managing or keeping up with your own tracking, then they're going to
Yeah.
get to you.
That's kind of scary. So
Yeah.
obviously we know about, hey, that, at some point, whether it's a government or insurance, like across all parties, companies, verticals, but like from, putting that on the shelf for a second, are you aware of specific verticals or specific compliances where this is required?
Yeah. So the healthcare, the HIPAA requirements are moving this way. I think they're sort of, I know they're at least testing or assessments. I don't know if they're quite there yet. But the FTC is one example where vulnerability management is required. Now, it doesn't say it needs to be truly continuous and daily, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's sort of in the works to get that to the next level. The cyber insurance is kind of carrier by carrier still, but again, I think that's not far off from being a strict requirement, because I mean, again, the insurance company wants to help the businesses, protect their business, right? They want to not get hacked and blah blah blah. Can't
No,
and they also
that's
not want to have to pay out. So if they can get if they can get a lower premium, because if they can charge for, that's a win-win, right? So they are at the point of playing it. And actually, on that point, one of the things you asked about before is like, if I is the data stream provides an application that the customer and or the MSP together will fill out, and there isn't a specific checkbox in there for vulnerability management today, but there is an open box for comments or additional information. Well, they could include in there a nodeware output report of a executive summary as an example of the from last week, and they could supply it to show and say, hey, we're doing daily continuous vulnerability management. Here's a report that shows what we're doing and the type of data we get. Give us a lower rate. I mean, they may not demand that, but that's what they're trying to say is, hey,
or how about don't
we're a
raise our
lower
rates?
risk because we're doing this,
Yeah.
these extra proactive tracking of all my assets on my network. And we're, if we find a vulnerability, we go and fix it before it becomes a problem.
That's fair. No, I mean, listen, on the cyber insurance side, we've heard a lot of examples of where people give more information than that's what's requested, so that whenever, I guess, something gets to this, ghost organization called underwriting, like they're going more
Yeah.
than just check boxes, right? I always
Yeah.
wonder, and maybe this is a question for another day. I always wonder
Oh,
who are the people who are in
that's
those
clearly
underwriting jobs.
the simple checkbox is going away, right? There's going to be validation of that you're doing the things that I mean, we've heard of some claims that have been clearly denied when somebody checked the box that they were doing MFA, and then when they did the forensic after a hack, these 10 systems do not have MFA on it, your claim is denied. You said you were doing this, you weren't. So
Yeah,
we don't have to
I
pay you.
like, yeah, I think underwriters are not generally technical people, right, at these insurance companies, and
Right.
I'm often like, technology is a complicated topic because it's just so, multifaceted. I'm curious how somebody who's not a technology person looks at check boxes and comes up with a price. Like, I'm sure there's some sort
Yeah.
of, formula, but still, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think they've evolved in cyber insurance in the last 2 years tremendously, right? I mean, I think 2 years ago it was just a simple checkbox. They didn't know, right? The underwriters didn't know the severity. They didn't know what they really needed to look for, and that's changing rapidly. And I think it's checking the box, but it's explaining more than just checking the box, right? It's providing, like us, right? We want to be able to provide a executive summary or a full network detail report that shows all the things that we're doing, and here's what we found, and here's our risk level. We know what it is, and here's what we're doing to improve it. I mean,
Fair.
that's ultimately what these guys want to see.
I
So
just think that to your point, right? When you're doing an insurance questionnaire once a year, that's a point in time. But when somebody comes to make a claim, you almost need to, like, you're almost on the defense, right? You almost have to
yeah,
prove, hey, I didn't just do this one time. I've been doing this consistently, and I'm going to prove to you that we were doing this more than just, once a year.
right, absolutely. Well, and I think there's a term that Larry Metters talked about, which is I don't think I have it right, but it's something like continuous insurability, right? Where it's not, again, you did the application, 8 months ago. Are you still insurable? Right? And are you doing these things that are going to maintain your insurability? When your renewal comes up, are you going to get renewed? So there's that movement. Again, whether it's insurance companies typically tend to drive government regulation because they like making money, and they're gonna force people to be more, fire alarms. I'm doing some work on my home, and the whole GFI, I got a socket was electrical outlet was replaced. Well, because it's 10 feet from a water source, its code has to have GFI. Fans in the ceiling now have to have timers rather than just an on-off switch, because there was too many fires that happened. So it you know it evolves. But I would, if you're not involved in any insurance directly or indirectly, I would start getting more involved. At least understand what your customers are going to be likely coming to you for. Understand what, if they want to stay insured, what they're going to need to have in their environment. And we can help you with there. There's some other blogs out there. There's a lot to learn, but it's going to be a critical element for any MSP's security business.
That's fair. Frank, no, I really appreciate you. By the way, weather looks great behind you. I hope it's not a cloud in the sky. So hopefully that's
Yeah, no, I'll do the quick show. This is Portland, Oregon. Nice July summer day, the Willamette River, downtown views. So yeah, come visit in July or August. That's when you get the sunshine. And
well, I still have that road trip somewhere in the list, Bend, Oregon, for the last blockbuster. But
all right, well, come on out.
there you go. Appreciate you for, number one, teaching us a little bit, because hey, we're constantly in the learning business, right? I think that's the technology space. If you're not learning, you're in trouble. Where do people find more about, I guess, the two sides, right? The continuous SaaS vulnerability tool, and then I guess like the services team, right? I guess they're two separate pieces.
They're two separate pieces to think about, but I don't know if you're going to put up my email or whatever on here. I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have, and look for help explain again that this. If nothing else, if we can help educate more people on the difference between vulnerability assessment, vulnerability management, and pen test, that trifecta is an important element to understand, and happy to help people understand what they can do and what tools they need for each one of those three, because they are distinct enough, but they're related.
All right. So just in case people want to reach Frank, I'm not going to put his email up because you might be listening to this in a podcast audio format. But, if you look up, so Frank, it's called Frank Raimondi, right? First initial, last name, like a lot of other people format their emails. And then it's at
Yeah.
IGIUS.
It's Frank dot. Yeah. First initial, last name. So FRAIMONDI at IGIUS.com is the easiest to remember.
Perfect. And check them out, right? There's
Look on
Nodeware is the
LinkedIn
name
or
of the SaaS application. So just that one's easy to Google, right? And then if you have questions, I see Frank out on the road a lot, but he surely answers his phone while he's walking around town.
absolutely, as you can see.
Awesome.
All right, George.
Appreciate you for jumping on, Frank. For everyone else, the session was recorded. We're going to have this on in a little bit under sessions on the MSPinitiative.com website. So you can go back and rewind this sucker and, take a couple, bullet points and then hit Frank up and figure out if this is something that, you're interested in adding to your either internal or to your customer environment. But, it seems like it's about $6 ish an endpoint. An endpoint is anything that responds to an IP address. You can exclude stuff, he said, which is good.
And that's for the year, right? The $6 is for the year.
Okay, that's even better. That's $6 an IP address a year. That's not bad. Now that you divide that by 12, and that's not monthly. It looks very expensive.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time, Frank. Thank you very much. For everyone else,
pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in. And we will catch you again. Please, keep track on what we're doing at mspinitiative.com. We'll guys catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.